Today's edition of the Spotrac podcast is presented by Bettor Edge. Visit bettoredge.com right now. Grab yourself $20 on the house using code Spotrac at registration. That's SPOTRAC, and get cracking on prediction bets, college football bets, NFL Week 16 bets, and plenty more. That's use code Spotrac at registration on bettoredge.com. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Thursday, December 18th. Really fun, interesting guest that I've been dying to have. She's been with the Spotrac community for over a year now, plugging away, kind of rebuilding this whole system from the back end. And her specialty, her name is Taylor Vincent. Her specialty is the NWSL, the Women's Professional Soccer League, which has gone through a few moments. And they're having a moment right now. For those of you who aren't aware, even if you're not a fan of the sport, of that league specifically, this is worth your listen because it's a new frontier with American sports. They have eliminated the draft process. It is a graduate college or leave college and negotiate a deal to sign with the team that you want to sign with. They have expanded free agency to the point of where you can start negotiating in the middle of the season. And in some cases, as she'll detail, players have switched teams in the middle of the season. They're going through major CBA hurdles in terms of salary cap and transfer fees and expansion with revenue that the players and the teams are putting pressure on the league to expand with. Really fascinating stuff. It's going to have trickle effects with women's sports as a whole, certainly the W. But look, there are remnants of this, and I think this discussion, as I kind of alluded to a few times, that look, smell, taste a little bit like where things are headed with college sports. I don't know that we'll ever get to a relegation structure in American sports in any regard, but they are modeling European soccer, the NWSL, closely because, quite frankly, many of their star players are leaving for European soccer. So it's a give and take process that American sports is sort of having to deal with. In some ways, I think what we're seeing happening here can transfer into some of these bigger leagues. The NBA is being openly honest about having an NBA Europe, expanding to that process, what an international schedule could look like. I do think we're in for some really interesting, at least discussions, if not changes. And this was a really fascinating, educational, fun conversation on the back end of this show. Before we get there, just a couple of quick hits because the sports business world just doesn't go away. Some news to share. If you follow us on socials and you're watching us live on YouTube right now, we have launched an NBA expansion tool. Speaking of that, speaking of branching out in the NBA, it does appear like 2 new teams are coming. You can love it, hate it. I think it's coming. It sure sounds like Seattle and Vegas are very much in play here, if not the odds favorites to land a team over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. You can go and build that team. We've had Keith Smith and Scott Allen put their heads together, as they do quite often with our NBA data, and quickly came together with a rule-by-rule based process that will allow you to draft a full expansion team for the upcoming 2026-27 season. You can utilize 2 to 4 structures. You protect players. One of the changes we made immediately based on some feedback is Keith has gone in and sort of put in default protections that he believes are kind of no-brainer. So you don't have to go and click through 250 players to actually get through this process. He has done the work for you to start. If you want to change some of his selections, you're more than welcome to do so. But take a run through this. All right. Let us know how it is. We certainly want to keep improving this because, oh, by the way, the WNBA is expanding. So we are in the process of taking what we've done here, making it work with the WNBA rules and guidelines and regulations. So we will soon have the ability to go and do that in that level as well. And I don't think it's going away. We have some rumored MLB expansion coming down the pipeline, and the NFL wants to get more international. We'll see if that ever becomes an actual NFL team existing in London or in one of these cities, Toronto, that have certainly been percolating over the past couple of years. But the NBA is here. It's back. It's doing this again. Go and play. Go and gamify this process with some Keith Smith nudged player protections on each of the 30 NBA teams for now. Major League Baseball, speaking of not going away, we've had some nice signings. We've had a little bit more progression towards the free agency. Generally speaking, this is the lull period, but we have had some smaller trades, some smaller signings. Relievers are just getting plucked left and right off of the board for those of you following in our transactions grid and things like that. I'm going to run down some of the tax updates because we do have pretty firm numbers for most of the bigger signings and some of the smaller ones over the past 2 weeks here. And again, whenever I talk payrolls, I'm going to be focused on the tax side of this, the CVT side of this. So again, I'm going to be showing you live here on YouTube if you're watching the current Spotrac 2026 tax payroll tracker, which has been refined. For those of you that have been following us for the past couple of years, we have been showing the difference between what actually exists in real time right now. So certain teams like Miami or such may have 8 players because there are pre-arbitration salaries to estimate. There are arbitration salaries not yet fully on the books, and they have done very little in free agency. Well, we're poo-pooing that. Okay. We have the ability, based on some work that I've done, some work that our data does, to project what the 40-man roster is going to look like on opening day. Now, we're not assuming that Kyle Tucker lives on the Philadelphia Phillies or that Kyle Tucker lives in the Toronto Blue Jays. Okay. Those players are still in limbo. Those players do not account for any sort of tax in 2026 as of yet because they are actual free agents without a contract. But the Miami Marlins, okay, have 2 players actually on the roster now. And yet, from a tax perspective, we are projecting their 40-man roster. They do have a 40-man roster built on mostly minor league and mostly pre-arbitration salaries. So using this pre-arbitration estimate, some arbitration estimates that we've developed using our market valuation system, and then the 2 guaranteed contracts you see here, it gets us to this projected tax total. This is what essentially, if the season started tomorrow, what we would be projecting the Marlins to account for in terms of their CVT payroll. It's 30th in the league. They've got 175 million of space. It's nowhere near where it needs to be in terms of being back in contention, despite the fact that this is a pretty decent roster built from the ground floor up. And we'll see what that gets to us by April. We've also added this to some of these teams. This is their current status. So for the Marlins, it's going to be a first-time pair with basically no limitations for the foreseeable future. But if we go to the Dodgers, for instance, okay, they're at the top threshold. They're a triple repeater. They're paying 50% on every single dollar they go over. And right now, that overage is $98 million, according to our projections. So they'll be paying right now an extra $83 million per the bill based on what their payroll currently looks at right now. So if I go back to the overall tax view here, you'll see there's that Dodgers number. There's 3 teams currently projected over 300 million after the Phillies did some damage in free agency here. The Blue Jays are coming. They are certainly well over that 244 threshold. Here again on this view is that quick look at the tax status for each team. A couple other things we've added. Here's the full breakdowns of how those bills are constructed. So there's the 83 million number for the Dodgers. This is where they live. The triple repeaters means they're at the 50% tax rate. This explains a little bit what those surcharges mean. And this is a blow-by-blow look at how the numbers are calculated to get to that 83 million based on where they are, how much they're over, and the tiers that they're being taxed at. Every team that's overtaxed right now based on our projections has this tax breakdown. And then one final thing that we've added, because I want to make sure everybody gets up to speed on this, because we're putting as much effort into the educational side of this as we are the actual raw numbers. If you scroll all the way down on your favorite team's tax situation, we have amplified this a little bit, the actual totals. Hopefully this is a little bit easier to understand. So there's some of those estimations that we've got built in here. We've also done this. There's that same tax breakdown that I showed you on the league tracker. This is for the Dodgers specifically in 2026. That calculates to the 83 million. If you keep going, I did some work just to sort of hash this out a little bit. So I'm explaining what the tax rate penalties are, just on a general basis. This is how tax salaries are calculated. Okay. And all of the various things that you're seeing here in this totals, I'm explaining a little bit more here for you. We're going to continue to add to this and add more and more options. You may have noticed there's some eyes sitting here. This will explain exactly what the heck is going on with some of this stuff. Okay. So we're going to continue to add as much little tool tips, nuggets, full breakdowns like this to sort of understand, help understand a little bit more what these numbers are actually coming from, what they mean, what they represent, and if they're projected, why we're projecting and how we're projecting. But if you're using our data and you're lost or confused, please reach out because we're looking to not only answer those questions, but maybe it's something that we need to build in like this to make everybody a little bit more aware of what the heck is going on, so that we're as transparent as humanly possible with this stuff. All right. I would be remiss if I didn't bring back up the Tua Tagovailoa conversation, because since we've last spoken, I was giving you the Dolphins' overall offseason portion of this, right? It was the here's what it's going to look like. And oh, by the way, here's a huge paragraph just in case the Tua situation gets to a point of no return. I still don't know if we're there yet, but what has happened since we last talked is that Tua has been benched. And I don't think this is very unexpected. It's perfectly plausible now that they've been eliminated from playoff contention to give Quinn Ewers a 3-week look. I don't think he's a starting quarterback in this league. He was barely a starting quarterback for his own college team, but he's a talented human being. And we have seen those players rise to the occasion at this level in the past. Not occasionally, okay? Not frequently, but it's possible. And it's perfectly plausible for them to be going this route. Tua becoming the third quarterback on the roster. So Zach Wilson is now the backup for the next 3 weeks. That's the one that has people really sort of spinning their wheels a little bit, because that's the one that screams to people, oh, he's done. Not only is he not starting, he's not even an option for Sunday. There's some politics to that, right? If you keep him as the backup, then he is sort of the thing looming over the 2 picks that Quinn Ewers throws in the first half. And you really don't want any of that getting in the way of the players on the field, but specifically Quinn Ewers. If you're giving him a fair shake, you want to take all the threatening possibilities from the outside away from the situation. Not that Tua is threatening. Okay? He certainly has not been a viable starting quarterback this season, despite the fact that, we do have a little bit of buyer's remorse. This guy wasn't bad last year. Okay, we weren't really thinking about benching Tua week 1 of 2025 in September. It's gotten to that point, and I don't think we're ever going back to the point of where we feel super comfortable about him. But I'll go through the numbers again quickly with one added point now that we've gotten to this level. It's still $99 million of dead cap. It's still $54 million guaranteed next year. There's still a $3 million guarantee that vests for 2027 and March 15th. All those things are still true. If you need to get that breakdown, you can read it on Spotrac.com in the Miami Dolphins offseason primer that I put together. The one now that is probably relevant to this situation we're talking to is there's a $20 million injury guarantee on Tua's 2027 salary. So while there isn't a massive cash vesting like Russell Wilson had, like Derek Carr had, there is that sitting out there, which means if Tua plays the next couple of weeks and unfortunately takes another hit to the head, and his career is now really, really in danger because obviously he has gone through that process one too many times, in my opinion. Now the Dolphins might be on the hook for that extra $20 million that they want no part of, clearly no part of. Okay. I don't think they plan on moving on from Tua next season without paying down half of the salary and hoping there's a team out there that wants to take him on for $25 million for 1 year and then go from there. I do think he will be a post-June 1st release in March of 2027. That's my anticipation. Well, they'll buy him out for that $3 million salary, take on the odd number of dead cap at that point in time, and go from there. But we don't know how that locker room is being represented right now. We don't know what the front office is going to look like. We don't know what the coaching staff is going to look like. And generally speaking, if all of that is brand spanking new to start a season, it's the best time to cut bait, even with the worst financial situation. But from a playing standpoint, there's no question that that $20 million injury guarantee is part of this plan. Yes, they want to see Quinn Ewers. No, they don't want to run Tua out there anymore because the fan base is revolting. But also, they've got to protect their backing a little bit because there's no part of them that wants that built into this already disastrous $99 million situation, $54 million of which is cash. So just a little added flavor to the growing concern that is Tua and the Miami Dolphins as we head towards the end of the 2025 regular season and into a tumultuous offseason for Miami. Again, I'll state where I stand. I believe he is on the Miami Dolphins roster for the balance of 2026. I don't think there's a trade partner, even if they offer to Brock Osweiler him, right, which is pay down salary and put a pick in there to send him to another team. It's not impossible. I don't think it's likely, is my point. I think he's a $54 million backup quarterback, which is essentially a $57 million backup quarterback because if he's on the roster March 15th, $3 million of 2027 fully vests. So $57 million essentially to walk through next season, which will be one of the biggest holdovers we've ever had in American sports. And I do think that's exactly where we're headed for next season, and then we'll see. Okay, it's time to bring in Taylor Vincent. We had a great discussion. It went in a bunch of different directions. It's very player-centric. And again, even if you're not a fan of soccer, even if you're not a fan of this league specifically, or don't know if you're a fan of this league specifically, the conversation we had about collective bargaining, roster construction, salary cap, the salary cap process, revenue sharing, the outside influences, the amenities that go into a league, all of it's relevant to whatever sport you follow most. And either your league has gone through it, is going through it right now, maybe getting to a point, Major League Baseball, where some of the stuff is going to become super relevant, but they have taken big swings with the NWSL. And some of it has gone great. Some of it has had pushback. They've been flexible. They are in the process of making, I think, a big change with one of their superstar players having a contract dispute. And that's exactly how Taylor and I begin our conversation, which is coming up right now. All right. We've done a lot of work behind the scenes together, but this is the first. Welcome to the Spotrac podcast, Taylor Vincent, our resident NWSL expert. It's been a minute. You've been around for a bunch of months with us now, doing a heck of a lot of work behind the scenes, some of it, becoming forward facing in terms of articles and some data. But this entire league has taken big steps forward in a lot of ways. And I think we're headed towards a few more major steps. And that's meant a lot of work for you. So first of all, thank you. And your thoughts on this league and where it's headed.
I mean, I think right now where the league is at, it's an interesting turning point. I think we all kind of saw that there was going to be a problem, right? I think over the last couple of years, there's been some really big names that are heading off to Europe, right? A lot of panic ensued, right? Is the NWSL right in trouble with all the U.S. Women's National Team's players heading to Europe? So I think to a certain extent, you kind of saw this coming, that the salary cap was going to eventually become an issue. And it looks like Trinity Rodman is the player which we're going to take a stand and figure out kind of what the future of this league looks like in terms of retaining global talent.
Okay, let's get there. You buried the lead. The Trinity Rodman situation is, of course, the hot topic right now. There's a lot of hot topics. I mean, this is only kind of one of them. But look, this is how we got to a point we're going to get to down the road here, which is the players advocated for no college draft, and that's exactly what the league has done. They have reacted to what the players have been asking for the most part. But this is a big ask. Explain to us the situation with Trinity Rodman, her contract, where it's headed, and how it kind of intertwines with this salary cap situation that the league has put in place.
So as a starting point, right, the NWSL, like most American leagues, has a salary cap. You kind of have to plan around that in terms of your player salaries. So with Trinity Rodman, who is kind of the big name free agent that the league has this year, The Washington Spirit and Trinity came together and they have an agreement that technically meets within the current salary cap. Now, the point of contention that's kind of happening with the league is, technically speaking, the Washington Spirit does not have anyone signed for the later years of Trinity's contract. So to that extent, the team and the player believe, including the NWSLPA, that it is up to the team if they would like to put a chunk of their salary cap all into one player. And this is where the league thinks, well, it's not within we'll put the spirit of the league, right?
Ironically.
I'm sorry. The spirit does not is not encapsulated anywhere in the CBA, which is where then, right, Trinity and the NWSLPA put in an official grievance, which would then get escalated into basically getting actually mediated between the league. And when we say league, we don't just mean the commissioner, Jessica Berman, but it also comes down to the board of governors, which is technically all of the owners or the representative of the ownership within the league structure. So all of that is kind of coming to a head because, right, the PA believes they should be able to spend their money, even if it looks quite stupid right now, any way that they want to. And a part of this is that with the new to be determined media deal, when the current one runs out, there is verbiage in the current CBA that allows for an increase in the salary cap based off of the money that trickles down to the teams from that new media rights deal. And the league, on the other hand, says, well, you can't count your chickens before you have them. So that's another kind of point of contention. And part of the contract that Trinity and the Spirit did agree on even has, right, the reminder of, in the CBA, each team is allowed to buy out one single guaranteed contract per year without it impacting the salary cap. You go over one, that's going to impact the salary cap. However, what we do also see is, instead of actual buyouts happening, a lot of the time we see what I call mutual terminations, where, right, the players want to move and go elsewhere, and the teams, right, not really going to actually buy out their contract. They're both going to kind of agree together, we're going to dissolve this, right? The team still has their buyout, and, right, the players clearly only getting paid for the time that they're within on the team.
So to shorten that, because I want to make sure I follow before we move on to the next CBA iteration here, which is, this is essentially a contract that dips into the next level of where the salary cap is going, where the media rights money could be coming into. They're banking, Trinity Rodman, her agent, and the Washington Spirit are banking on the fact that the league is going to expand enough to be able to tolerate this contract 3-4 years down the road. And the league is saying, that may be true, but it also may not be true. And we don't want to be forced into that by your contract, to which the Spirit are saying, if we get to a situation where the salary cap hasn't risen, we are more than willing to buy her out and make our financial structure work along with whether the rules are. So it seems like that the team, the agent, the player have thought this through enough to get this through the door. So where do we currently stand with this? Is this still in flux?
Well, so nothing has officially come out. ESPN has done some reporting. So I think a week ago, ESPN said, hey, the Board of Governors is making a vote. And then on basically this ability to use extra funds, which is not a new thing for the NWSL, right? This is what allocation money, which officially was getting phased out as of the end of next year, was originally for. It was for paying those players who, right, met certain metrics in terms of whether that be national team time or, right, end of year season awards, whether that be MVP or, right, best 11s. And, right, using that allocation money in order to pay them above the then max salary, because again, over the years, the NWSL has had both a minimum salary and a maximum salary that they've been allowed to pay players. And so the maximum salary has since gotten removed in the current iterations of the CBA. But as they were trying to phase out allocation money, it appears as though they're bringing it back, but calling it high impact player money, according to the reporting from ESPN. Now, one of the things that the reporting does cover is that there would be some certain amount of, right, not everyone would qualify for high impact players. There's either certain competitive markers they need to meet or certain commercial ones. Now, the concern with doing this is, right, if we look at the MVP of the last 2 years, right, we look at Temwa Chawinga, she did not come from a league that would have probably qualified her as a high impact player, and she did not, right, win a Ballon d'Or or was, right, the awards that they likely are going to use because they're global awards are heavily skewed towards the European team and Champions League. And because the NWSL does not involve themselves with any of that, it makes it really hard for American players to be rated where, granted, I'm going to do my skew equally with European counterparts, right? And right, I do watch this league more than I watch the Europeans, but right, that is my feeling and probably the feeling of a lot of American journalists or people who watch both consistently.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the other part of it, is that what are you holding back on just because of the way that you're defining these things and how, right? There's a general thing of whatever you are going to make kind of the measurement stick is what people are going to try to figure out how to game. So
Exactly. Yeah.
is this the real measuring stick that we want to be using moving forward? I mean,
But that wouldn't be a threshold that a player like Trinity could assume or build into her contract, right? It would just be something that the league would essentially grant upon her if she hit the
yes,
metrics, if she hit those thresholds, which seem to
correct.
be more vanity than anything for a player, of her stature, despite the fact that she's a U.S. national player and whatnot. But let me pose one more question with this one, then we'll move on. Do you think? And again, I'm asking you to speculate, which is probably not in your wheelhouse. Do you think the point of what Trinity Rodman is doing with this contract offer, aside from the fact that she believes that this is the money that she's earned or will be earning over the next 3 or 4 years, do you think the pressure she's putting on the league is about increasing the overall salary or about making public the notion that there shouldn't be a salary cap? What is more in her camp right now in terms of trying to get a point out there?
Right, without knowing, right, we're going to use that fun speculate. I would have
Yeah.
to probably say removing that salary cap,
Yeah.
because I think if we look at the teams that are, right, the higher end of the market skew, it's the teams that are very willing to be investing in things offside of the salary cap that, right, impacts how the players' lives are. Right, the teams that are in the top 6 are for the most part the ones that are doing the extra stuff in terms of training facilities, in terms of, right, the other things that impact players and their happiness within a team. And so removing a salary, right, this is where the commissioner Jessica Berman has talked ad nauseum about the league superpower being the parity, right? That any day, right, the top team can lose to the bottom ranked team, right? Because that's the way we built it in. But the reality of the situation is that as the, right, league keeps growing and, right, keeps adding teams, unless we can continue to feed it with those global superstars, the likelihood is what happens to all of the best players is, well, they feel like they're undervalued, because at the end of the day, if you do end up having something where, well, yes, one player on the team is paid an enormous amount of money, and then the salary cap is meaning that the other 20 on the team aren't paid as well, is that really a place where that top player wants to be in terms of their growth because of, right, the level of play of the other 20 something? Because clearly, right, if you're not going to get a team of superstars if you're spending most of your money in one place.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things that the league will have to come to terms with, is we don't want to create a situation where we're becoming a feeder league for those, right, 5, 6, 7 European teams who are willing to pay buttloads of money for players.
Yep. The parity is important, right? I mean, I follow multiple leagues now, doing what I do for a living, and just because I enjoy it. And certainly in the soccer world and the European football world, that is the strength of the Premier League, right? That they have 5 to 6 teams that year in and year out are at the top of the table because they spend the most money, because they have the most resources, because they have, gazillionaires owning this thing, and corporations involved, and everything humanly possible to print as much money to buy the best players. The American side of this says that, right? Because that is the point here. The American side of this says that we could probably live in that world, that you could have the big 3 or 4 teams, maybe 5 or 6, as you mentioned, in this NWSL, putting in the bulk of work, putting in the bulk of money, raising the salaries year to year, which is a positive thing. That's how you keep the superstars here, is you keep that maximum salary going and going. And then you'd have to build in revenue sharing, right? And that's probably the system that they don't want to have to get into, because they've seen it fail in every sport in this country.
I mean,
and
I
it's
think
failing in baseball right now, right? But it does work. It does get you off the ground floor if you need to grow quicker, which I do think this league does.
And I think the other part in play is that those European teams that are spending most of the big bucks also have men's teams.
Yes.
And they are actually utilizing the fact that the women's teams are spending so much money to help with them meeting there are certain cost structures that they have to meet within their own men's league. And they're like, well, look at this. Look at all this spending. That's a negative on our balance sheet. So we can spend more on the men because we're losing money over here.
Crazy.
And part of what Jessica Berman has been talking about is the sustainability of the league and making sure that we're also creating a league that is consistently making money versus just becoming I've got a lot of money, let's spend it and have fun.
Yeah.
And I think it's a hard balance because the league is still struggling with making money consistently and coming in the green versus the red.
And how much money is there to be made if you don't have the superstars, which is how you open this whole conversation, which is how everybody opens this conversation, right? It's tough.
I mean, it's hard to say with the ticket
like
sales.
You and I do. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's going to come down to market in that case because even now there's markets that are Portland didn't have Sophia Smith all last year, and they still had the highest attendance in the average attendance in the league. But there's also markets that are kind of struggling comparatively. If we look at Houston, Louisville, North Carolina, they're not getting. Granted, they have smaller stadiums, but they're also not filling those smaller stadiums.
Yeah. Okay. We have faith. I think the Trinity Rodman situation is a positive step, and I do think the way you and I are reading this, at least over the course of the last few weeks, it sounds like things are going to go in her favor here. I'm speculating based on what I'm reading, but something is going to give with this situation, which is going to be somewhat league-wide changing. This will be a foot in the sand for the next person in. And by the way, you did it again. You nailed the transition. Let's talk about Sophia Wilson, because speaking about a top player getting a top salary, that's exactly what happened here with Sophia Smith, now Wilson's player option, which she has officially accepted. I'm hearing the number around 1 million. Is that the number you're hearing as well?
I mean, that's the number that Spotrac started reporting last night. The official release wasn't until this morning, But I'm kind of intrigued because I think, most of the time the player options or any options are agreed upon on the initial signing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know a world in which a player would probably shoot down $1 million player option. I mean, the way that free agency is in the NWSL is different than most American leagues. It copies now more of the European style, which is starting July 1st, the players are free mid-season to start negotiating and signing with new teams.
Yeah.
So, Wilson was able to start talking with other teams. I think a lot of people were wondering if she'd go back to Denver, which is where she is from, and sign for the new expansion club there. I'm not super duper surprised at her staying in Portland, just because I think, the fans love her. She's coming back from maternity leave. She's going to get a lot more, leeway as she ramps back up into her prior form than if she went to a new team and is that star player and is also trying to get back into form and kind of the expectations that might be on her in that case.
Yeah.
So not super surprised she took the player option. I'll be very intrigued to see what happens next year because, she's out of contract with Portland and it'll be full free agency, maybe with this high impact player stuff coming into play. And I think it'll be quite easy for her to qualify whatever metrics they end up agreeing on.
And again, this Rodman situation could translate right over to her next situation. She might be this version of that next year around. So,
Yeah.
a positive
And I think
step.
one of the things is that her player option actually expires at the end of the month. So to a certain extent, she couldn't really wait out
That's right.
potentially the Rodman situation, because even if the Board of Governors voted a week ago, right, we still haven't seen anything. But once the Board of Governors vote to make an addendum to the CBA, it does need to go back to the NWSL Players Association to get ratified. And that's where they can tweak or have opinions about
Mhm.
stuff, and the back and forth really goes. So with the clock on the table,
Yeah. Take the $1 million, right?
yeah.
Okay. You mentioned free agency. Let's kind of wrap the free agency system and the lack of a draft system into our final segment for this, because I do think this is the portion of this league specifically that other fans that follow other sports and other leagues in this United States should be paying attention to, because this is a one of one right now. And it is new, and they are very, very transparent about the fact that they are kind of figuring this out on the fly. They don't have something to go off of. They are rewriting the script every month. Every situation is kind of brand new. Just kind of give me the, as if I'm 5 years old version of this, and then your thoughts about where it's kind of gone and where it's evolved into.
Yeah, so if we look at, last year was the first year we didn't have a draft. So if we go
Mhm.
back 2 years, 12 teams, were we at 14 at that point? We were at 14, sorry. 14 teams, 4 picks each. A quarter of the draftees didn't end up signing, which is a pretty good chunk. They don't end up going with the
Yeah.
team, right? They either go abroad, announce their retirements quietly. Um, but a quarter is a big chunk. Now, if we compare it to last year, which was our first go at no drafts, one of the big shifts that we saw was the utilization of short-term contracts, because that wasn't actually available the previous year when we had
Mm,
drafts. So a lot of the collegiate signings were actually on short-term contracts that basically overlapped with either people going on loans for the first half of the year, or potentially people who had season-ending injuries in the late part of the previous season. So they were helping fill in that roster, but they're actually getting a lot more game time and time with the team in order to prove themselves than just being a non-roster invitee, where you're with the team basically for preseason. Now, of that, we still had a bit of a drop off, I think, comparatively, of the number of draftees getting signed between the draft list class and the drafted class. But I think one of the big kind of interesting things, and this is where we're about to get into the fun part, is that through November and December, we saw very few signings. And then January is about 90% of the signings of those draftees, which is, I mean, roughly makes sense. The collegiate season just ended a few weeks
right.
ago. So they've probably been negotiating quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then we again did see a couple throughout the season just continuing to add, as whether they wanted to finish their degree or what else. So I think it'll be really interesting to kind of get that second data point of this current offseason to see what is the trend and how are things looking. Because I think one other data point in this is that a lot of the teams were really close, whether it be due to injuries or other things, to their league required minimum active salary, not active salary, active roster. So are we going to see the utilization of more short-term contracts? And then there's the other part of it, which is everything is now guaranteed.
Yeah.
So in previous draft years, you could get drafted and signed to a semi-guaranteed contract, which means the team can decide at any point before, usually the roster freeze in October, that they no longer wanted you on the team and you would get waived, and that was it. You were done.
Yeah.
So having guaranteed contract really gives more stability to these players, but again, the teams are being significantly more choosy with it, and that was kind of overlapping with last year's draft list class.
So, I tend to kind of side more with the players with a lot of my conversations, just because I am following the players, and then that essentially leads to team data, right? It's funny how that works. I track player data, and then it leads to me having team data. But in this case, I want to make sure we give the league credit. This is a massive, massive win for the players. This is
Yeah.
young 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old players being able to choose their first destination and negotiating an agreement that is fully guaranteed. That is that is almost a one of one right now in American sports. It just is. Certainly the ability to choose and to not have to go through the draft system. That is very, very unique. And I've read, I don't know, a few dozen interviews regarding this. Every single player has loved this. No player has had a situation where they have been burned by this structure. And I don't know how the teams would be either, because of what you're saying. The teams are getting shorter term contracts so they can budget themselves accordingly with these entry level players and not have to worry about cutting them halfway through the season, because everything is so shortened up and tightened up that they can make a mistake with it and get out of it in 18 months, you know?
And another thing is that it's forcing the teams to have things to entice players outside of salary.
Big time. It's recruitment. It's like the college days, right? Which it's all bleeding together as it is in every sport, especially football, right? So it's a really smart play by this league specifically to get ahead of this, because these players have agents. These players are making money in college. That's my next quick question. How much have you seen? How much do you anticipate players not going to this league yet because the college situation is improving so much financially?
Yeah, I've kind of been watching all the fun in NRI. I'm really happy that both my coaching time in softball and my playing time, and I didn't have to deal with any of this.
It's a mess.
Yeah, I have friends who are D1 coaches and having fun with it. But I mean, I think it's going to depend a lot on the situation, because, right, even if we look at, we'll use Caitlin Clark as the go-to example. A lot of her money, she's making a ton, but most of it is coming not from the actual playing salary, but it's coming from all the commercial opportunity. And that commercial opportunity, we're going to cycle back to number one, is actually a large part of what the NWSL can leverage in order to keep players in the NWSL. Because even if you're a U.S. Women's National Team player, if you go abroad, a lot of stuff, especially when you're doing stuff with advertisers, is, well, right, my people aren't going to see you play except for maybe it's a World Cup year. Right. But in a normal NWSL, right, the U.S. Women's National Team is going to pay 12, 14 games. It's the NWSL visibility that's really going to help with those commercial opportunities.
That's right. Okay. Free agency. You kind of breezed past it. It's crazy interesting. Okay. It's mid-season. You can just bail on your situation and go find another team and negotiate a contract. That seems like a step too far for me. Like, I can't even imagine rooting for a team and then midway through the best player just bails on the situation.
The reality of this, so this was last year. They pulled it in from the end of the season to when they could start kind of doing stuff to, I think, September. We still didn't see any signings until the season ended or team season was completely done. This year, we did see one, and that player was then immediately traded elsewhere in the league for the remainder of the season. Yeah. Chloe Ricketts was with Washington, right? I think she's only 18 at this point. Her U18 contract had just wrapped up, maybe. And she signs the new contract while Washington Spiriters still full tilt season, and then ends up getting traded to Houston to wrap up the end of the regular season. And so we have the one thing. I know that there's been, I think a couple of other ones that got rumored. I think this is where we get into a very interesting area, because technically speaking, teams are supposed to announce any new signings, even if it's the free agency ones, within 2 weeks of it getting approved by the league. And a large reason for this is that there have been contracts that they sat on for years.
Really?
About signing extensions, and then they're like, oh yes, this happened. That happened last year. Oh yes. All right. We can look at Sam Coffey signed an extension with Portland last March that we only learned about mid this season. Bella Bixby signed a contract extension before she went on maternity leave, and it wasn't announced until she was done with maternity leave. Basically a season plus afterwards. So are the teams actually announcing it when it gets all finalized? Not sure. Casey Murphy was reported signing with Boston, which again is an expansion team, so maybe it's not quite the same, months ago, but it only became official this week. So, I mean, within the teams, they've got to know, and it's got to be at least slightly weird. But I think this is how most European teams deal with
Hmm.
stuff. And I don't think, to a certain extent, maybe the actual signing, but most teams know when you're looking elsewhere. And right, we can even use the recently, right, Hina Sugita was traded from Portland, where she is very beloved, to LA. And a lot of it was not even this free agency, but looking forward at next free agency. There was some mismatch in, I think, expectations, and Portland didn't think that they were going to be able to come up with what she wanted. And so they're like, well, to preface this from being a very ugly exit, let me get something out of it.
Yeah. That's very
Um,
American, by the way.
yes.
I
Now,
mean,
granted, the NWSL does have a thing in their CBA that says a player cannot be traded without their approval.
okay.
So right, it's not like teams can just, oh, you're not re-signing, let me trade you. But the reality is, similarly to other sports that do this, it does get a little awkward when you know someone is going to your competition and you might still be playing said competition later this season.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's consequences, but for the most
Yeah.
part, it's been so new that it hasn't been really, really
Yeah. I
thrown to
think
the wolves yet, right?
at this point we're still in a place where everyone is just kind of using the time largely to
To
start
negotiate.
negotiations.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
which makes sense, and that's probably a good thing, right? It gets us to a better
yeah.
landing spot, I think, but I have to bring it up because you will finish with it. The transparency of the league, right? I mean, this is, uh this is the elephant in the room. It's in the CBA that they don't want these numbers reported.
Yep.
They don't want any kind of contract information out there, and clearly, they are somewhat suppressing even the transaction part of it, right? They are keeping things not so much publicized. You do a heck of a lot of work and have a heck of a lot of connections to be able to put the dots together for the most part. But um, I want without an opinion on what they are doing, what they are asking us not to do. Is it a positive for the league to be operating this way right now, or do you think that more transparency with just the just the transactional side of things, Taylor, would be
Yeah.
beneficial to the marketability of this league?
Well, I think even the any trade within the league, we get very good, right? This was
Sure.
this much money. It was either in allocation money or it was in transfer fees, but we still don't have any visibility into the transfer fees outside of the league beyond what gets leaked by
Yeah.
reporters. There is, yeah, the CBA clause that basically says the league cannot confirm. The player and the player representatives can leak the information. We're not allowed to.
Mhm.
I do think selfishly, it makes it more fun when you get that visibility. And granted, the players themselves have only had salary transparency on each other for a couple of years. So, right, there was a long time in the NWSL where you didn't even know what anyone else made within the league. And I think
Which is
that really
crazy, and which
only,
is what's happening in college sports right now, right? Everybody's trying to figure out what everybody else makes so that they can be properly compensated themselves. That's crazy,
correct.
right?
I mean, that's only there. I mean, that's going to help the owners more than anything because it
Yeah.
doesn't allow people to kind of grade themselves on what's a fair market value. Now, compared to other leagues, right? I think men's soccer is very transparent on salaries and pay. Across the globe, there is very little to no transparency
That's
on
true.
women's soccer pay. And I think part of it may be a on one side, right? Maybe the players don't want the visibility because I think it also gives, right? The internet is a place that players should probably never look at, but it does give the people on the internet certain things, more power to potential opinions they might have if they
Yeah.
do end up looking on the internet. But on the other hand, I don't know if across the globe they want everyone to see what these actual salaries are, because it comes with the other hand, which is fans being like, how can you pay them that little? Like,
Yes.
pay the players, what are you doing?
I believe
Um,
we are in the midst of a WNBA lockout because of that exact reason, and I am
but I
raising my
think
hand and taking blame for it, but I'm somewhat proud of it in the same regard because I do think
I
that
think
there is
yeah.
a level of suppression with it. I really do.
And the other part of it is that when you get to know the salaries, especially when you have a salary cap and you know what the internal and external transfer fees are and right how
Yeah.
that could potentially impact the cap, it becomes a lot more fun for fans to go and see,
Gamify.
like, can we trade for them? Can I even afford this person? Right? Can we get them
Yes.
here? Versus things that right now you're just like, maybe. Like, oh, that'd be realistic. We should get all the players in the world. I want all of them. Yes. But like, how do they actually fit? Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think there's that part of the fan interaction that can be boosted when you have the extra transparency.
It's well said. It's well said. It is a fine line, right? Because I think you're treading lightly without saying it. I'll say it. One of the biggest issues that the WNBA, specifically the W, faces is comparing Caitlin Clark to Steph Curry, and we got to stop. We just got to stop. Okay, these are two different leagues in two different various situations. It doesn't mean that the WNBA shouldn't continue to push forward with better CBA structures and better, trickle down effects and all the bells and whistles you're talking about that some of these organizations have been really good at. I do think, and I will say this wholeheartedly, I think the NWSL has done a pretty darn good job of expanding in areas that are outside of the financial structure. You know what I mean by that? So they're expanding, obviously, team-wise. But I do think that they are promoting their top teams, and they are pushing those top teams to have better amenities, to have a better fan experience. They are marketing the product, I think, better than they've ever done that. And maybe that's commissioner, maybe that's the teams themselves. And and I'll finish where we started, the Trinity Rodman situation seems like it's very player-centric. This is the Washington Spirit looking at the league and saying, we want to pay this player more money, as much money as we possibly can right now. Please let us. That is not normal. Okay.
Yeah.
I follow teams in every league. That is not a normal thing, that a team is begging the league to let them pay that player more money. This is all positive. These are all positive steps, financially speaking. So their concerns with the transparency of the financials are understandable. I think the league is getting to a point now where the Sporticos of the world want people to know that Sophia Wilson is $1 million athlete right now. And when it gets to that point, and when there's multiple members like that, I do think that the league is going to have to reconsider this, because as you mentioned, and as I've said internally with the people that we work with every day, it does become a gamified situation where fans, the hardcore fans, will sit down and try to armchair GM, even the smallest situations, even how the trades work and the fees work and half seasons work and all this. There's a lot to this. There's a lot to these leagues, as you've kind of laid out here for us, that the hardcore fans, I think, will get into if they have the right information. And unfortunately, right now, we don't have that information. You're doing an amazing job with what we don't have, or what we do have, I should say. Thank you for joining. Keep up the great work. Have a great holiday season. We'll talk soon.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler.